Archaeologists have discovered a huge ancient city hidden underground in Mexico, which may give a better understanding of the Maya civilization.
This year, I went into Songdung, which is the world's largest cave. It's this massive opening, 6 miles of underground cave.
Hello?
Someone from the team discovered a doorway that leads to one of these caves. The more they dug, the more they found.
High above the thick Honduran jungle, a lost city found. Archaeologists are excavating and removing dozens of artifacts believed to be from the mythical White City, where an ancient civilization once thrived.
The Hellfire caves are a series of man-made tunnels and caverns in Buckinghamshire, England, stretching about 260 meters underground. The caves were created in the 18th century and were used by a secretive club founded by Sir Francis Dashwood, which included influential figures like William Hogarth and John Wilkes. Though Benjamin Franklin wasn't a member, he was also a close friend of Dashwood and visited the caves several times, apparently. The club operated under various names, such as the Brotherhood of St. Francis Wycombe and the Order of the Friars of St. Francis of West Wycombe. Their motto, "Do what thou wilt," kinda hints at their hedonistic lifestyle. Members were rumored to engage in these wild, pagan-like rituals. They were said to hold feasts that included excessive drinking and debauchery. Locals would gossip about the devil worshipping supposedly going on down there. Some even whispered about them practicing human sacrifices. By the early 1760s, the club had faded away, but urban legends about the caves continued. One of the most popular stories involves the ghost of Suki, a young maid who was accidentally killed during a prank. People also claim to have seen her ghost wandering the caves. Another legend mentions the spirit of Paul Whitehead, a former steward of the Hellfire Club, who's also said to haunt the tunnels. The Edinburgh Vaults, also known as the South Bridge Vaults, are a series of chambers beneath the South Bridge in Edinburgh, Scotland. This bridge was built in the late 18th century, completed in 1788, and originally served as a way to connect different parts of the city. For about 30 years, the vaults were used for different businesses. There were taverns and workshops for cobblers, but the vaults were never properly sealed against water, which meant they began to flood soon after opening. By 1795, businesses started abandoning the space, and the vaults quickly became a hangout for homeless and criminals. Illegal gambling dens started cropping up, and there were even rumors that body snatchers started stashing corpses down there. As the Industrial Revolution changed the landscape of Edinburgh, the area nearby turned into a slum, and the vaults then became cramped living quarters for many poor families. The conditions were horrible, as you can imagine. I mean, living in a tiny room with 10 other people, no sunlight, and a stench that combined stale waste with fish oil lamps. It's no wonder robberies and killings became so common. The vaults were eventually closed down as early as 1835 or as late as 1875. And they were mostly forgotten until the 1980s, when a former Scottish rugby player, Norrie Rowan, stumbled on a tunnel leading to them. Norrie helped a Romanian rugby player escape from the secret police through this very tunnel during the Romanian Revolution. I want to know more about that, but that's probably another video. The Paris catacombs are, of course, one of the most famous underground sites in the world, and they definitely have a reputation for being a little creepy. Beneath the city of Paris lies a vast network of tunnels and chambers filled with the bones of over 6 million people. It's one of the most macabre tourist destinations in the world, but most of the tunnels are off limits, with many believing they were sealed off to keep something sinister contained. The catacombs started out as limestone quarries in the late 18th century, but when Paris's cemeteries started getting overcrowded and then started causing health issues, city officials decided to move some of the bones underground. They transferred remains from several different graveyards into these tunnels, stacking them up, kind of creating these artistic displays of skulls and femurs. Urban legends say that the catacombs are haunted, that lost spirits roam the tunnels. And not just the spirits of people who were interred here, but people who have wandered too far into the catacombs and never found their way out again. Nooshabad underground city, located near the town of Nooshabad in Iran, is a site that dates back to the Sasanian area, around 5th century CE. It's It's a massive underground complex that stretches over 3 kilometers and is made of a series of tunnels, chambers, and passageways that were used for different purposes. There were living quarters, storage, and places of worship. The city was carved out of the soft volcanic rock, making it easier to create intricate designs and rooms. What's really intriguing is that Nooshabad was built not just for shelter, but as a refuge from invaders. When threats loomed above ground, residents could escape into the subterranean labyrinth, which was cool and dark, perfect for hiding out. But here's where it gets a little creepy. Some say that the tunnels were also used to house prisoners, and that eerie happenings have been reported by those who've ventured down there. As the story goes, some believe that the spirits of those who were imprisoned still linger in the shadows. The Terracotta army, discovered in 1974 by a group of farmers digging a well in China, is an incredible archaeological find and a source of some pretty spooky legends. The massive pit is filled with thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, horses, and chariots, all made over 2,000 years ago to protect the tomb of King Shi Huang, China's first emperor. The idea was that these clay warriors would accompany him into the afterlife and fend off any threats. And many scholars believe that the Terracotta army was never meant to be seen by the living. For centuries, it was just a myth, hidden away beneath the earth. The emperor's followers worked for more than 36 years to create this elaborate tomb, and the fact that it was disturbed has led to tales about the massive underground tomb being haunted. After the discovery, things turned dark for the farmers. Apparently, their village was relocated due to the increased attention from archaeologists and tourists, and many of them faced hardships like illnesses and financial trouble. In the pits surrounding the warriors, skeletal remains were also found, including those of women who were thought to be the emperor's concubines for the afterlife. This has led to even more rumors about the site being cursed. Toiming Cave, also called the Cave of the Twins, is located in a nature reserve in Israel, right on the edge of the Jerusalem mountains. The cave is pretty interesting because it's packed with archaeological finds from different times in history. Researchers have found human bones, old weapons, and coin hoards in there. There's also evidence that the cave had an alabaster quarry dating back to the Middle Bronze Age, but what's really cool is that it might have been used for necromancy rituals during the late Roman period. Between 2010 and 2016, archaeologists found over 120 intact oil lamps inside this cave. Most of these lamps are from the 2nd to 4th centuries CE, and they were purposely placed in narrow crevices along the walls or under debris. Some spots had clusters of these oil lamps mixed in with weapons, pottery from earlier times, and even human skulls. This all hints that the cave could have been used for rituals related to communicating with the dead. The idea is that people were lighting these lamps to connect with spirits of the underworld, trying to talk to the deceased or predict the future. It turns out using caves for rituals was a common practice back in the Roman and Byzantine days. Historical texts even mention cases of witch trials happening in caves like this. Beneath the streets of Colombia, South Carolina, there's a mysterious network of catacombs, and no one really knows for sure what they were built for. These eerie tunnels are completely off limits to the public. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Colombia was booming, and extra space was needed, so a series of passages and rooms were constructed under the city. Now, initially intended for practical uses like storage, as time went on, the stories about these catacombs started to shift. They started being used during Prohibition for bootlegging operations or to stash away stolen goods, but the legends didn't even stop there. There are even darker tales that the catacombs may have been used for more sinister things like secret rituals or hideouts for some of the worst criminals in the city. And then you have the fact that nowadays these tunnels are sealed off. A lot of it's off limits, and a lot of them remain unexplored. So, what could be lurking down there? Beneath the streets of Rome lies a vast labyrinth of tunnels and chambers known as the catacombs. These ancient burial sites date back to the 2nd century and served as the final resting place for early Christians, Jews, and various minority groups during the Roman Empire. While they may not be your typical underground city, the sheer scale and history make them really cool. The catacombs are divided into several key areas, including the catacombs of San Callisto, the catacombs of San Sebastiano, and the catacombs of Priscilla. Each of these locations has intricate tombs adorned with all these beautiful frescoes and sculptures, giving you a bit of a glimpse into the beliefs and lives of those who are buried there. Some of the artworks depict biblical scenes. Others have symbols of faith reflecting the hope of resurrection in a time of persecution. As you wander through these narrow passageways, the atmosphere can feel eerie, no doubt. And there are miles of tunnels filled with remains of over 1 million people, so that definitely adds to the creep factor. Some legends say that the catacombs are haunted, with whispers of the past echoing through the dark corridors. The Bach Casemates in Luxembourg are the remnants of this massive fortress built in 693. Over the centuries, this place changed hands multiple times, and with each new ruler, there was some new flair. But it was the Spanish who really got the ball rolling in 1644 by transforming medieval cellars into fortified firearm emplacements. Then in the 1680s, a French engineer stepped in and supercharged the defenses. The Bach Casemates became a labyrinth of tunnels over 131 feet deep, or 40 meters. The underground had stables, workshops, kitchens, bakeries. The place was impenetrable too. In 1794, it held off against a 7-month siege. By the late 1800s, though, peace needed to be made, so the Treaty of London led to the fortress's demolition. It took 16 years, but in the process they realized that they couldn't tear down the Casemates without affecting the city above, so a section of these tunnels are still standing today. Kaldhara village in India may not be an underground city, but it is very old, abandoned, and supposedly cursed. So what happened to this place? Well, legend has it that a tyrannical prime minister named Salim Singh set his sights on the daughter of the village head. She wasn't into him, but he wasn't the kind of guy to take no for an answer, and he threatened the entire village with dire consequences if they didn't give in to his demands, to, I guess, force this woman to marry him. Now, instead of bowing down to this cruel ruler, the people of Kaldhara packed up and they left. And not just a handful of people, 85 villagers worth of people vanished into the desert, never to be seen again. But they did leave something behind. Before they vanished, they placed a curse on the village, declaring that no one would ever be able to settle there again. And today, Kaldhara still stands, but locals warn that anyone who tries to spend the night there may not make it out alive. With a series of underground tunnels found in the ancient city of Haosheng. In 2023, archaeologists were doing excavations in the 4,300-year-old stone city of Haosheng in Inner Mongolia when they came across a series of tunnels built beneath the city. The city was heavily fortified. In fact, it's ranked as one of the most tightly defended Inner Mongolian stone cities discovered to date. It was almost like the city from Attack on Titan. The inner city was surrounded by an outer city for defense, and outside of that, a walled gatehouse, so a triple defense system. There were also tons of terraces and moats. You were not getting in here easily, and if all defenses did fail, they had the recently discovered underground tunnels to retreat to as well. There were 6 intersecting tunnels about 5 to 20 feet deep that ran under the entire city. Not only would they have been used for extra security, but they also doubled as underground transportation systems connecting various parts of the city, kind of like what we have with underground walkways in cities today.
Next up, we have the newly discovered ancient tunnels of the Pyramid of the Moon, the second largest building in Teotihuacan, found earlier this year in Mexico. The tunnels have remained a secret for nearly 2,000 years, making their discovery groundbreaking in the fields of both history and archaeology. The tunnels are accessible via secret passageway in Plaza de la Luna, located in the center of the city. The passageway is buried 33 feet deep and it extends from the plaza all the way to the Pyramid of the Moon, moon, where it turns into an elaborate labyrinth of underground tunnels. While no one has been able to enter the tunnels yet, modern technology has given researchers the ability to begin mapping their new discovery. It is believed that the Pyramid of the Moon in its heyday was likely used for religious ceremonies that would have included human sacrifice, which has brought researchers to the conclusion that the tunnels might possibly represent the underworld in accordance with the ancient Teotihuacan belief system. As I said, the tunnels are yet to be explored, but teams are hoping to check them out in the near future to see if they can uncover any hidden artifacts that might give them a more in-depth look into the ancient civilizations of Mexico. So keep an eye on it.
Next up, we have Darinkuyu, a massive, ancient underground city in Turkey. Now, I talked about this place just recently, but what I didn't know was how this place was discovered, and the story is remarkable. Let's just imagine for a moment that you're doing some reno work in your basement and you gotta knock down a wall, but after taking your sledgehammer to it, you notice a small hole. One of your chickens runs into the hole and you chase after it and you realize, holy crap, this isn't just a small hole, there's actually a full-on tunnel in here. And the tunnel leads to another tunnel and another until you realize that there is actually an entire underground city right behind your basement. I mean, Narnia? No, it's actually how Darinkuyu was discovered in 1963. This story is true. The 280 feet multi-level complex was built in the 8th to 7th centuries BCE and was once the home of around 20,000 people. Imagine just finding that in your basement. It's nuts. One of the coolest stories I think I've ever read about.
Next up, we have a 4,300 foot long tunnel discovered in 2022 in Egypt, underneath the Temple of Osiris Magna that might just possibly contain the final resting place of the final ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra. Yes, like, James, I have mentioned this one before, but it's freaking Cleopatra. I can't not talk about it. The temple where the tunnels are located is one dedicated to the god Osiris, also known as the god of the underworld, who symbolizes death, resurrection, and the cycle of Nile floods, which were necessary for agricultural success in Egypt in ancient times. Basically, it's the perfect place for Cleopatra to have been buried. As I said, the tunnels are almost 4.5 thousand feet long. They are also 6.5 feet tall and reside roughly 43 feet underground at the temple located just west of the ancient city of Alexandria, where Cleopatra is believed to have been buried alongside her lover Mark Antony. I mean, you've heard of all roads lead to Rome, but in this case I feel like all tunnels in Osiris's temple will eventually lead to Cleopatra. Statues and ceramics dating back to Cleopatra's time period have also been found in the tunnel, only furthering my personal belief and the belief of many that the tunnels do in fact contain her tomb. And I think sometime this year, maybe next year, we will find out the answer, because I know teams are working really tirelessly on exploring and kind of excavating the entire thing, so get excited.
Orvieto is a beautiful Italian city, but relatively recently, an entire network of ancient tunnels built beneath it came to light, known as the Orvieto Underground. It was something that was kept secret for a long time. Orvieto is built on a volcanic rock called tuff, which is relatively soft and easy to carve, and for thousands of years residents had been digging into this rock, creating an extensive network of underground passages and rooms. In ancient times, these tunnels were used for storing wine and olive oil. The cool, stable temperature underground was perfect for preserving stuff. There are also wells and cisterns that were dug to collect and store water. During medieval times, the underground was used more strategically. The tunnels acted as secret escape routes during sieges and invasions, and some of the caves were even used as bomb shelters during World War II. You can visit the underground tunnels today, but only through guided tours.
Next up, we have the tunnels of Chavin de Huantar, located in the highlands of Peru. Chavin de Huantar is a 3,000-year-old temple, which is impressive in and of itself, but of course it has become even more impressive with the discovery of an elaborate tunnel system located beneath the earth of the temple, believed to have been built sometime between 900 and 200 BC. It is believed that the tunnels hiding underneath Chavin de Huantar were built for ceremonial purposes, such as communicating with gods, using incredibly advanced advanced engineering techniques that allowed them to channel water and connect the city to the heart of the temple. Many artifacts have been brought up from the tunnels, including bowls and statues, one of which depicts a hybrid human jaguar figure. The discovery, made in the 1940s, has given archaeologists and historians some great insight into the ancient lives of Peruvian citizens.
One of the coolest places you'll visit in Poland is said to be Wieliczka, salt mines, aka the underground salt cathedral. This is a huge subterranean complex near Krakow dating back to the 1200s. It's a huge rock salt mine. Rock salt at the time was very precious, and over centuries they transformed the mine into this extensive network of rooms, passageways, and tunnels that go more than 1,000 feet underground. Not only is this a massive underground complex, but it's not as utilitarian as you'd expect either. There's amazing artwork to see here. The miners used the salt crystal deposits to create chapels, chandeliers, statues. One of the most impressive features is a detailed replica of Da Vinci's The Last Supper, all carved from salt. The mine operated for a very long time too, centuries. It only stopped producing salt in 2007, so that's about 700 years of operation. Now it's a tourist destination, and from what I've heard, it is a must-see.
Next up, we're going to Italy, because according to archaeologists, there is an entire ancient underground network of tunnels located directly underneath the royal palace of Naples, built in the 1800s by Ferdinand II of Bourbon, the king of the Two Sicilies, as an escape route for monarchs as well as a passageway for military personnel. The tunnels, which spanned all the way from the barracks to the royal palace, started being built in 1853, but just 2 years later, that all came to a halt when an explosion took place in the area due to a political uprising that would eventually lead to the end of the kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Luckily, construction was picked back up shortly after the incident, and the tunnels were completed on May 25th of that same year, 1855. Ferdinand II of Bourbon died in 1859, and in 1861, the kingdom of the Two Sicilies fell. In the 1900s, the tunnels were used as explosion shelters as well as a place to smuggle contraband, until they were closed off. Today, the tunnels have been reopened, and unlike many of the other tunnels on this list, except I believe the one James just mentioned, these tunnels can be visited by the public as part of a tour of the Royal Palace of Naples. If you've been, let me know down below in the comments.
We've all heard of the Coliseum, one of the most famous historical structures in history, the site of countless gladiatorial fights in ancient Rome. It's still around today, one of the most iconic landmarks in the entire world, drawing thousands of visitors each year. But it was only very recently that the tunnels underneath the Coliseum were opened to the public. The massive amphitheater itself is definitely impressive, but the hidden tunnels beneath offer a much deeper look into Roman culture and traditions. These underground passageways were actually where the gladiators would prepare for their fights. It's basically the ancient version of the backstage area of a concert or sports event. For a long time, tourists couldn't access the underground areas, but just in 2021, several of these hidden passageways were restored and opened to the public, which is pretty cool.
And finally, we have possibly my favorite ancient tunnels, the mysterious underground tunnels of Brazil that, no joke, scientists truly believe were created by either giant sloths or giant armadillos. In 2009, a farmer broke through a dry patch of soil into an underground cavity while he was out on the town on his tractor. Researchers were quick to investigate the area, and what they found was, well, pretty insane. An almost 50-foot long tunnel with a diameter of about 6.5 feet. After that, 1,500 more tunnels, including one with branching tunnels that altogether measured in at about 2,000 feet long, were discovered in the area. So, what made them? Well, a geologist by the name of Luis Carlos Weinschutz believes that they are the work of either giant sloths or giant armadillos that lived 10,000 years ago before the mass extinction of megafauna. While scientists are pretty secure in their explanation of what built the tunnels, they're still struggling to figure out why, as the tunnels are much larger than necessary if the animal had intended on using them to escape predators or as shelter in bad weather. Personally, I think the giant animals might have been attempting to create a secret tunnel for two lovers leading to Omashu, but you know, that's just me.
Kicking off our list at number 10. Athens, Greece. Of course, Athens is the largest city in Greece, and of course, if the Olympics are any indication, Athens is quite old. It's been around for a while. People have been hucking javelins for quite a few years. One of the oldest cities in the world, being inhabited for around 7,000 years. Yeah, not bad. It was once a powerful city-state and the birthplace of democracy, which is a little less exciting than the Olympics, but still rather cool. Exploring the city today can be quite exciting. Some ancient cities are in rough areas of the world, but to visit Greece, learn about ancient democracy and ancient Olympics, then go swim in beautiful water, it's amazing. It's the best trip ever. Ancient empires like the Romans, Byzantine, and the Ottomans, they also settled in this ancient city as well, so a lot of history to go around. Ancient Greeks also used to work out naked. That's just a fun fact that I wanted to share with the world. The word gymnasium translates to the Greek term gymnasion, which meant school for naked exercise. So I ask, what would you prefer? Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters or Nico's School for Naked Exercise? It's 50-50. Number 9. Ray, Iran. Ray is the oldest city in the province and one of the oldest cities on the planet with evidence of inhabitants going back as far as 6,000 BC. It's like 8,000 years ago. I can't even fathom that. The Avesta are these ancient scriptures of Zoroastrianism. Now, Arabs took control of the city in 641 AD, and it was almost destroyed by the Mongols later in 1220. Now, somehow, after all of that, there's still historical monuments that still stand to this day. And that includes the 12th century Tigral Tower and an excavation site where 7,000-year-old artifacts were initially discovered. That's so old. Number 8. Fayum, Egypt. We kicked our list off with ancient Greece, so it's only a matter of time before we get into some ancient Egyptian goodness. The oldest city in Egypt, and one of the oldest in Africa, is the city Fayum. Fayum was founded around 4000 BC, and it's located 62 miles southwest of Cairo. Now, Fayum is in a historical spot. It's located in an area that was once the ancient city of Crocodilopolis, whose inhabitants once worshipped a sacred crocodile named Pashukos. How amazing is that? I feel like the pyramids and the tombs in Cairo are all the talk, but Fayum? It's an ancient relic. Go there instead. Today, the Fayum is home to markets, mosques, and baths. Worth a visit if you're doing a big trip. Don't forget about sacred crocodiles when planning your itinerary. Pyramids, then crocodiles. 1, 2, boom. Number 7. Helike, Turkey. According to Greek legend, Helike was a place that was destroyed by Poseidon himself, aka the god of the sea, storms, earthquakes, and horses. See, what happened was he was upset because those who resided in Helike were refusing to give their statue of Poseidon, or even a copy of it, to the Ionian colonists in Asia Minor, which is now modern-day Turkey. Our modern archaeology, along with ancient sources, have been able to deduce that an earthquake in 373 BC caused the ground beneath the entire city to completely liquefy, which is, well, that's horrifying. And then from here on, a tsunami then hit and totally engulfed the city, and it's said that this all happened in the span of 1 or 2 hours, which sadly left no survivors. In the 1980s and 1990s, under the direction of archaeologist Dora Katsanapopoulou and physicist Steven Suter, a more accurate location of where Helike may be came to light in 2001, and the ancient city was finally located. Number 6. Caral, Peru. An American history professor named Paul Cossack was absolutely fascinated by ancient settlements, as many of us are. But this passion led him to devoting much of his time to studying in Peru, which has, well, such an incredibly rich history already. In 1948, while in Peru, Paul made the discovery that he's been waiting for his entire life. He came across the dry remains of an ancient city. The remains were carbon dated and placed back to around 5,000 years old. The city of Caral was once home to around 3,000 inhabitants pre-Inca. This was already a thriving location while the pyramids were being built. That's how old the settlement is. It appeared to be quite a peaceful place as there were no obvious signs of battles or weapons, but among the remains were homes, plazas, temples, and an amphitheater, so pretty nice stuff, all things considered. It's said the city was abandoned in 2000 BC, and in 2009 AD, it was made a World Heritage Site. Number 5. Machu Picchu, Peru. For this one, we have another one of the most famous and well-known lost cities, Machu Picchu. This site was built over 500 years ago, and it was once known as the lost city of the Inca, until the modern discovery of it in 1911 by archaeologist Hiram Bingham changed the game. Him and his team actually stumbled upon an ancient city almost accidentally. They were looking for another ancient city, and then they found another one. That's kind of a win, I don't know, or a loss, not really sure. Machu Picchu was built by the incredible Incas who have surprised us in our modern times. Many times with their unbelievable technology or abilities that they had all those years ago, somehow we're still uncovering secrets. It's believed that this place may have been built for the Inca emperor as a sort of estate almost. See, Machu Picchu was built in 1450, but it was abandoned about a century later at the time of the Spanish conquest. And as of 2007, it has been voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world, and work continues to be done on it to maintain and restore this wonderful location. Number 4. Pompeii, Italy. One of the most famous lost cities of all time, the Roman city of Pompeii was sadly destroyed in 79 AD when the eruption of Mount Vesuvius just went off and then volcanic ash was then strewn about the city. It's horrible. It's one of the worst things I can think of. Fast forward all the way to 1748 when the Duke of Naples had a summer palace built just 24 kilometers south of Naples on Italy's west coast. Through the construction, as those working on the palace began to dig, they started to come across buildings and streets. And from here on, once news spread, people began to flock into the area, and it was realized what had been uncovered was a lost city, the lost city of Pompeii. Again, you just find an entire city, like, hey, I found a road under here. What's this about? Fascinating. Throughout the Victorian times, people would come and see as more of this town was uncovered, and eventually they found an amphitheater, a forum, houses, and shops. Everything you'd expect a town to have, really. This one was just, covered in hot lava, so untouched for a little bit. Number 3, Skara Brae. This is an area that is located in Scotland, and it was found in an exceptionally surprising way. In 1850, there was this huge storm that hit Scotland, and it was so bad that around 200 people passed away from it. It was terrible. Now, the next day, however, once the storm had eventually passed, residents of the Orkney Isles began to notice that part of a cliff had dislodged, but it uncovered a sort of hidden settlement almost, which is insane. It's like some Zelda temple. We're like, what is this in this isle? Tests were able to date this site back from 3200 BC to 2200 BC, and it was shown to have been inhabited for around 600 years. There were round stone homes there, and the roofs were made of whalebone and peat. It was pretty creative. The design of this little city suggested that there wasn't a hierarchy, but rather a group of people living peacefully as farmers, or herdsmen, or traders, or anything not involving battle. You know what I mean? While the site is small, it's pretty mighty. The houses are in quite great shape for the amount of time that has passed. This little settlement in Europe is the most complete Neolithic village, and while it's older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, it's been called the Scottish Pompeii because of how well preserved it is. Number 2, Sigiriya. In 1831, it is said that Major Jonathan Forbes of the 78th Highlanders of the British Army was on horseback, and on his way back from a journey, that's when he spotted the bush-covered summit of Sigiriya. In the 1890s, archaeological work slowly began on the site, but Harry Charles Purvis Bell, way too long of a name, was really the person who began to start large-scale work on this area. The Cultural Triangle Project, which was launched by the government of Sri Lanka, began to really focus their attention on Sigiriya in 1982, and for the first time, archaeological work began on the entire city. It took a little while, but we got there. Basically, the city consists of an ancient citadel that was built by King Kashyapa in the 5th century. There's an upper palace on the top of the rock and a mid-level terraces. There are moats and walls and gardens that extend out from the base of the rock as well. The location once served as a palace and fortress, but it was abandoned after the king's death. And finally, number 1, Mohenjo-Daro. This is a location whose name is said to roughly translate to a mound of the dead's men. This is one of the world's oldest urban settlements, as it was found and built somewhere around 2600 to 2500 BC, and what is now Pakistan. But it was abandoned as the civilization that called this place home declined. For almost 4,000 years, this site was seemingly forgotten about, and the remains of it were undocumented until an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, R.D. Banerjee, visited the site in 1920 and found a flint scraper, which then convinced him of the site's rich history. And from here, excavations of the site began, and as the 1980s kicked off, it was named a World Heritage Site officially.
Number 10. Shangri-La. First described in writing by English author James Hilton, Shangri-La is a utopia nestled in a valley in the western end of the Kunlun Mountains, which has become synonymous with an earthly paradise. It is said that the people who lived there were almost immortal, living hundreds of years longer than normal people and aging very slowly. Hilton was the first to call it by this name, but ancient Tibetan scriptures mention 7 such places, which were created to be sacred places of refuge for Buddhists in times of strife. The name seems to come from Shang, a district in southern Tibet, Ri, the Tibetan word for mountain, and La, meaning pass. Therefore, Shang Mountain Pass is believed to be the place where the mythological city exists, but that hasn't stopped other places from claiming the title. In 2001, a county on the northwestern part of the Yunnan province in China renamed themselves Shangri-La County, though many dispute their claim, since it seems that Hilton actually traveled to a place called the Hunza Valley, located close to the China-Pakistan border, which is an isolated green valley surrounded by mountains enclosed on the western end of the Himalayas, so it fits the description pretty well. But the people there actually seem to age faster due to increased ultraviolet radiation on the higher altitude areas, so the jury's still out on that one. Before we get to number 9, folks, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out so that we can keep bringing you the most amazing videos. Number 9, California. Now, I know what you're thinking. Connor, if California isn't real, then where does Mickey live? Well, I'm not talking about that California. I'm talking about the place the state was named after. In a Spanish novel published in 1510, a place akin to the Garden of Eden or Atlantis was described by the author as a mysterious island, quote, to the right hand of the Indies, entirely populated by women and had no metal other than gold on it. It was ruled by Queen Khalifa, which is where the island got its name, California. When Spanish explorer Hernan Cortez came to North America, he thought that he'd found the mythological place off of the mainland of America, because there appeared to be an island, when really it was only the bottom peninsula of the state, across the Sea of Cortez, which was named after himself. But Cortez was obsessed with the story, and since this island was technically to the right of the Indies and had so much gold on it, you can see how the name came to mind, and thus California was found. Well, they explored north and realized that it was not in fact an island. That didn't stop Cortez and others from drawing it as one on maps for hundreds and hundreds of years. YouTuber Johnny Harris actually has a fantastic video all about that if you want to hear more. But for now, the location of the storybook version of California still remains a mystery. Number 8. Thule. Stepping into Norse mythology, which has some of my favorite stories, Thule is a cold and peaceful place where they had months with no sunlight, said to be located between Scandinavia and Iceland. The ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was the first to write about Thule during his travels around 330 BC. He was also one of the first to describe the effects of the moon on the tides and to estimate the length of the British coastline, and was a specialist in longitude and latitude. Some scholars believe that Thule is just another name for what is now called Norway, while others think that it is truly a lost island off the coast of Iceland. The Germanic tribes in Thule allegedly showed Pytheas around their homeland and explained that in the winter the sun did not rise at all, but in the summer there was no night. Number 7. Camelot. Known as the court and castle where King Arthur reigned, Camelot first appeared in 12th century texts and eventually became synonymous with Arthur and the world that surrounded his stories. Some people believe that the place is entirely fictional, but many more still have attributed it to other places in Great Britain where castles still remain standing. Debate has been going on since the 15th century about the location of the beautiful capital of Arthur's kingdom, and we may never know the true location where Merlin and the Knights of the Round Table called their home. Number 6. Lyonesse. Sticking in Arthurian legend, Lyonesse was the home of the hero Tristan and was said to have been lost to the sea. The story of Tristan and Iseult sees the two traveling across the kingdom from Ireland to Cornwall to deliver Iseult to Tristan's uncle for marriage, but the two unknowingly drink a love potion and fall for each other, having to endure many battles to save their love. The kingdom was supposedly located on the Isles of Scilly, and the 140 islands that exist there now are apparently just the hilltops of the now sunken kingdom off the coast of Cornwall. There is evidence to suggest that water levels were remarkably lower at the time, and that in the last 3,000 years there have been enough submergence that this lost kingdom could still exist in the water below. If they ever made a movie about Tristan, I wonder if they'd get Liam Neeson to play the Lyonessian. Number 5. Aztlan. The Aztecs were one of the most powerful civilizations to emerge from the ancient Americas, and so much about them has been lost to time and to conquerors wiping out their history. While much is known about their later days as a civilization, we know very little about their origins. Allegedly, the mysterious island of Aztlan is where the Aztec people came together to create their society before migrating to the Valley of Mexico. According to legend, there were 7 tribes who lived in 7 caves near the island, and in order to maintain peace between their peoples, they came together and moved to Aztlan, which means the land to the north, the land from whence we, the Aztecs, came. Since it was so long ago, the island could have been in an area that is no longer submerged in water, and searches for it have taken place from the bottom of Mexico all the way up to Utah, but it's yet to be found. Some think it's pure myth, while others hold out hope that it will be discovered. Number 4. Julfar. Home to the legendary Sinbad the Sailor, Julfar is one of the most famous cities of Arabia that has been lost to the desert. Located near the now super modern Dubai, Julfar was the hub for the entirety of the southern Arabic trade in the Middle Ages, because unlike other lost desert cities, Julfar was a bustling port town. Now here's the cool part, this city has actually been found. In the 1960s, archaeologists discovered signs of settlement and civilization dating all the way back to the 6th century, and have since found countless residences, shops, and items which have helped us unearth the mysteries of this lost city. This find was very important because it helps historians fill out the timeline of the area, showing how neighboring towns received goods and made trades, as there were few port towns described or found before. Number 3. El Dorado. The very idea of a city made entirely of gold is enough to fascinate people. Add in the fact that the place has been lost and is awaiting a brave explorer to discover it, now you've got a legend. The origins of the tale come from the Wieliczka tribe in Colombia, and El Dorado doesn't actually refer to a city, but to the king at the center of the city or the society. The Wieliczka tribe had an affinity for golden treasures and often used them in rituals for their gods, and one of their most important rituals was conducted when they got a new king. The king would be stripped naked, covered in gold dust, and set on a raft adorned with gold and jewels to the middle of Lake Guatavita. The townspeople would then throw golden coins and trinkets into the lake to appease the gods, and the king would wash the dust off of himself in the lake, after which he was known as the Gilded One, or El Dorado. In 1545, conquistadors attempted to drain the lake to find the lost treasures and found gold along the edges of the lake, proving their theory. They used bucket chains to drain as much as they could, but they couldn't reach the center. And in 1580, a businessman tried to drain it again, and while lowering the water level and finding treasure along the edges, he too couldn't reach the center. And in 1965, the country of Colombia named Lake Guatavita a protected area, making it illegal to do any more searching. It is estimated that at the center of the lake lies what could amount to billions of dollars in ancient gold relics, but we will never know for sure. Number 2. Kalahari. In 1885, a Canadian entertainer and adventurer named Guillermo Farini, also known as the Great Farini, became one of the first Westerners to cross the unexplored and treacherous Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. When he returned to Canada, he wrote a paper and showed photographs of ruins he discovered which proved the existence of a civilization which had been lost to the desert sands. In his paper, he wrote, "We camped near the foot of it, beside a broken line of stone which looked like the Chinese wall after an earthquake, and which, on examination, proved to be the ruins of quite an extensive structure, in some places buried beneath the sand, but in others fully exposed to view." He continued on to say, "We traced the remains for nearly a mile, mostly a heap of huge stones, but all flat-sided, and here and there the cement perfectly plainly visible between the layers. Many expeditions have been conducted to find the lost city, including 12 by the grandparents of none other than Elon Musk, who wants to steer away from ancient civilizations and start a new one on Mars." A 2016 documentary series used aerial photography and radar in conjunction with Farini's descriptions and found some man-made ruins near an oasis in the Kalahari. More exploration is needed, but it's very possible that we have found this lost city. And finally, we reach our number 1, which is of course Atlantis. Arguably the most famous lost city, Atlantis has captured the imagination of people from around the world since it was first mentioned in writing by the Greek philosopher Plato in 360 BC. It is said that the island was a place of extremely advanced technology and an unmatched navy, but it was lost in one terrible night of fire and earthquakes and sank into the sea. Since then, there has always been someone looking for the lost city to prove it's real, and one of the most promising expeditions was made by Canadian-Israeli journalist and investigative archaeologist Simcha Yakubovich, who has made many documentaries and discoveries about ancient civilizations. He partnered with film director James Cameron and used Plato's text and new emerging technology to find some incredible evidence on the sea floor. 6 Bronze Age stone anchors off of the coast of Spain in the Strait of Gibraltar, one of the areas believed to be the resting place of Atlantis. One of the other main theories is that the Atlanteans were actually the Minoan civilization on the island of Santorini, Greece. Around 3,600 years ago, the Thera eruption occurred and the island shattered, and it, as well as the Minoans on it, were lost to the sea. With the location and the way the island was lost being so similar to Plato's descriptions, this seems like a great candidate for the lost city of Atlantis.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Iram of the Pillars. This place is also known as Atlantis of the Sands, and it is a lost city or area that is spoken of in the Quran. In the Quran, it is said to be a place that is full of lofty buildings, and it was populated by a group known as Ad. The group had turned away from Allah, so the Prophet Hud was sent to summon them back. The people did not listen or obey, and as a result, it is said that they were punished with a sandstorm being sent to the area for 7 days and 7 nights. In the end, the city is said to have vanished beneath the sands as if it never existed. In the 1990s, a team which was led by Nicholas Clapp, who is an amateur archaeologist and filmmaker, announced that they had found this lost city. It is said that this was done using NASA's remote sensing satellites, ground-penetrating radar, and images taken by the Space Shuttle Challenger. These tools gave them the opportunity to see old camel trade routes and where they all once converged. This point is a well-known area, and once excavated, it is said to have revealed the area known as the Irem of the Pillars. In our number 9 spot today, we have Helic. According to Greek legend, Helic was a place that was destroyed by Poseidon, the god of the sea, storms, earthquakes, and horses. He was upset because those who resided in Helic were refusing to give their statue of Poseidon or even give a copy of it to the Ionian colonists in Asia Minor, which is now modern Turkey. Our modern archaeology, along with ancient sources, have been able to deduce that an earthquake in 373 BC caused the ground beneath the entire city to completely liquefy. From here, a tsunami then hit and totally engulfed the city, and it is said that this all happened in the span of an hour or so, which left no survivors. In the 1980s and 1990s, under the direction of an archaeologist named Dora Katsonopoulou and physicist Stephen Suter, a more accurate location for where Helic may be came to light, and in 2001 the ancient city was located. Every summer excavations continue to be carried out, and every year we learn more about this area and the secrets it holds that come all the way from prehistoric times. In our number 8 spot today, we have Mohenjo-Daro. This is a location whose name is said to roughly translate to, quote, Mound of the Dead Men. This is one of the world's oldest urban settlements, as it was found and built somewhere around 2600 to 2500 BC in what is now Pakistan, but it was abandoned in the 19th century BC as the civilization that called this place home declined. For almost 4,000 years this site was seemingly forgotten about, and the remains of it were undocumented until an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, R.D. Banerjee, visited the site in 1920 and found a flint scraper which convinced him of the site's history. From here, excavations of the site began, and as of the 1980s it was named a World Heritage Site. In our number 7 spot today, we have Heraklion. Also known as Thonis to the Egyptians, this was an ancient city that was located near the mouth of the Nile River. Greek legend says that this was the city where Hercules took the first steps into Africa, as well as the place where Paris hid Helen before the Trojan War began. This is all to say that, to legend, this city was super important, but aside from the legend, no one knew where this place was or how to find it. Well, just over 2,000 years ago, it turns out that either an earthquake, a tsunami, or a combination of the two hit the city and submerged it underwater. It used to be believed that this place and Thonis were two separate places, and that both were located on what is now Egyptian mainland, but neither of those things turned out to be true. In reality, in 1999, after 5 years of searching, archaeologist Frank Gaudio located the ruins of the city underwater as they had been submerged in the ocean. Since then, excavations and explorations of the ancient city have taken place, and it was stocked full of some incredibly cool treasures from thousands of years ago. In 2010, a type of ancient Nile riverboat was found here, and even just a few months ago in August of 2021, it was announced that wicker baskets that contained fruits of the dome palm tree as well as grape seeds that date back to the early 4th century BC had been found among the ruins. In our number 6 spot today, we have Sigiriya. In 1831, it is said that Major Jonathan Forbes of the 78th Highlanders of the British Army was on horseback and on his way back from a journey when he spotted the bush-covered summit of Sigiriya. In the 1890s, archaeological work slowly began on the site, but Harry Charles Purvis Bell was really the person who began to start large-scale work on the area. The Cultural Triangle Project, which was launched by the government of Sri Lanka, began to really focus their attention to the area in 1982, and for the first time archaeological work began on the entire city. Basically, the city consists of an ancient citadel that was built by King Kashyapa in the 5th century. There is an upper palace on the top of the rock and mid-level terraces. There are moats and walls and gardens that extend out from the base of the rock. The location once served as a palace and a fortress, but it was abandoned after the king's death. Not only is this now a World Heritage Site, but it is also one of the best preserved examples of ancient urban planning. In our number 5 spot today, we have Taxila. This location was established in 600 BC and was abandoned somewhere around 500 AD, and it remained unidentified until 1863 AD when Alexander Cunningham, the founder and the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, realized that the directions to get to Taxila were being misinterpreted. The site was first excavated by John Marshall, who worked there for 20 years. This area has become famous because it holds the remains of several settlements, the earliest of which dates back to around 1000 BC. This location was designated as a World Heritage Site in 1980 for a multitude of reasons, but perhaps most importantly because the ruins of the 4 settlements throughout history reveal the pattern of urban evolution through more than 5 centuries, and the value of that kind of insight cannot be overstated. There are even accounts which claim that the University of Ancient Taxila was one of the earliest universities in the world, which is unbelievable. In our number 4 spot today we have Machu Picchu. For this one we have another one of the most famous and well-known lost cities, Machu Picchu. This site was built over 500 years ago, and it was once known as the lost city of the Inca until the modern discovery of it came in 1911 by archaeologist Hiram Bingham. Him and his team actually stumbled upon it almost accidentally while looking for another ancient city. Machu Picchu was built by the incredible Incas who have surprised us in our modern times many times with their unbelievable technology and abilities that they had all those years ago. It is believed that this place may have been built for the Inca emperor as a sort of estate. Machu Picchu was built in 1450, but it was abandoned about a century later at the time of the Spanish conquest. As of 2007, it has been voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world, and work continues to be done on it to maintain and restore this wonderful location. In our number 3 spot today we have Pompeii. One of the most famous lost cities ever, the Roman city of Pompeii was destroyed in 79 AD when the eruption of Mount Vesuvius exploded and volcanic ash was strewn about the city. Fast forward all the way to 1748 when the Duke of Naples had a summer palace built just 24 kilometers south of Naples on Italy's west coast. Through the construction, as those working on the palace began to dig, they started to come across buildings and streets, and from here, once news spread, people began to flock to see the area, and it was realized that what had been uncovered was the lost city of Pompeii. Throughout the Victorian times, people would come to see as more of this town was uncovered, and they found an amphitheater, a forum, houses and shops, everything you'd expect a town to have. This one was just ancient and buried. Now the ancient city of Pompeii is one of the most visited tourist attractions in the entire world, and excavations still continue on with secrets always being revealed. In our number 2 spot today we have Skara Brae. This was an area that is located in Scotland, and it was found in an exceptionally surprising way. In 1850 there was a huge storm that hit Scotland, and it was so bad that around 200 people passed away from it. The next day, however, once the storm had passed, residents of the Orkney Isles began to notice that part of a cliff had dislodged, but it uncovered a sort of hidden settlement. Tests were able to date this site back from 3200 BC to 2200 BC, and it was shown to have been inhabited for about 600 years. There were round stone homes here, and the roofs were made out of whalebone and peat. The design of this little city suggested that there wasn't a hierarchy, but rather a group of people living peacefully as farmers, herdsmen, and traders. While this site is small, the houses are in quite great shape for the amount of time it's been. This settlement is Europe's most complete Neolithic village, and while it is older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, it's been called the Scottish Pompeii because of how well preserved it is. No one is exactly sure why the residents of this village abandoned it, but it is likely that a change in climate is somewhat, if not fully responsible, and a storm might have been the reason those living here had to leave in haste, which is deduced by how all of their belongings were left here. In our number 1 spot today we have Caral. An American history professor named Paul Kosick was absolutely fascinated by ancient settlements, like I'm sure a lot of us are, but this passion led to him devoting much of his time to studying in Peru, which has such an incredibly rich history. In 1948, while in Peru, Paul made the discovery he had been waiting for when he came across the dry remains of an ancient city. The remains were carbon dated and placed to be about 5,000 years old. This city was once the home to around 3,000 inhabitants pre-Inca, and this was already a thriving location while the pyramids were being built. That is how old this settlement is. It appeared to be quite a peaceful place as there were no obvious signs of battles or weapons, but among the remains were homes, plazas, temples, and an amphitheater. It is said that the city was abandoned in 2000 BC, and in 2009 AD it was made a World Heritage Site.